I had a revenge affair after I suspected my wife was having a second affair. I met my future wife 10 years ago, and we started dating shortly after. At the time, we were both about 15 years old. Our relationship was always great, with only small arguments and disagreements, nothing serious. Looking back now, however, I realized that I was always the one who put in the most effort and took initiative in most things. From communication, planning dates, and intimacy to other aspects of our relationship, I was always the one to make things happen. I was the one planning our outings, initiating conversations, and keeping in touch. Our intimate life wasn't bad. We were intimate anywhere from a few times a week to several times a day. I was the one eager to try new and exciting things, while she was more reserved. She enjoyed pleasing me in certain ways, but never took the lead herself. Financially, I was always the more stable one and the primary breadwinner. She chose to focus on her hobbies, her family, and eventually settled into a routine as a homemaker by choice, to the point of working only part-time. This isn't to say she was after my money. Far from it. I think she always felt she had settled down. I used to struggle with bad acne, started dental treatments late, and wasn't as fit as I should have been. She never gave any indication of this bothering her, so I had no idea. About 5 years into our relationship, and 1 year after we got married, she met a man at the gym. She claimed they were initially just friends. They worked out together, enjoyed talking, chatted online, and even went out for dinner and similar things. I was kept completely in the dark about this noob friend and never suspected anything. A few months later, she went on a weekend trip with friends, a trip I had to pay for her share. She left on a Friday and was back by Saturday, telling me she'd had a disagreement with the friend she traveled with. She spent the entire day depressed, withdrawn, and crying multiple times. At that point, I was more worried about her than suspicious. Eventually, she broke down crying and confessed she had cheated on me. It took me a while to process what she had just told me, what she had done, and I felt numb for the first few minutes. When I finally snapped out of it, I left the room and got sick several times before breaking down in tears. She told me she hadn't wanted it to happen, that it was a mistake. She said she felt an overwhelming attraction and a deep connection that she couldn't resist. However, after spending the first night with him, she woke up next morning and realized what she had done. She realized he didn't care about her, didn't love her, and was only using her. She also realized she didn't care about or love him, that it had only been a fleeting infatuation. To make matters worse, she admitted she had done things with him, things she had always refused to do with me. From the day we met, I loved her and always felt proud that our relationship had endured storms where others had faltered. My family loved her, and my friends admired her. People always told me how lucky I was and praised me for having such a wonderful girlfriend and later wife. I always did my best to show her how much she meant to me, surprising her with gifts and making her my priority. I was even willing to indulge her preferences, even if she didn't reciprocate. What followed was a mix of anger and despair. I yelled at her as tears ran down my face, asking why she did it, how she could do this to me, and if she didn't love me anymore. Her response was that she didn't know why, that she had been weak and caught up in the moment. She begged for forgiveness and pleaded for another chance. She gave me complete transparency, immediately quit the gym, although it turned out to be unnecessary since, when I tried to confront him, I learned he had quit too. She opened up to my parents and her mother. Her father had passed away some time ago, and I did my best to move forward. We began couples therapy shortly afterward, and also individual counseling. I occasionally had fits of anger, not physical, but verbally harsh. I called her names and said terrible things. Most of the time, she accepted it quietly. Only occasionally did she snap back, saying things like, "I accepted you for who you were, and no other woman would ever love you." Both my parents and hers did their best to keep me in the relationship. At the time, I foolishly believed that at least my parents would have my best interests at heart. They told me that mistakes happen, that we could overcome this and grow as a couple and as individuals, and that she loved me despite everything. It took me months to get past the anger and disgust. I never loved her the same way again, but I started to love this new version of her, or at least I thought I did. She was willing to do whatever it took to help us heal and make things work. After her outbursts, she signed a post-nuptial agreement in my favor, waiving almost all rights to financial support for me. She initiated much more, and our intimate life genuinely improved. I couldn't bring myself to do certain things for her after that. It disgusted me completely. We had been each other's first in almost everything. Then she went and did something intimate, without protection, with the other man. She never complained, despite how much she had loved those things before. She also became much more willing to try things with me. When I later asked if she thought I was so repulsive, or why she did with him what she wouldn't do with me, it deeply hurt her, and she said she wanted to make up for it. For a few years, we were genuinely happy. I started going to the gym regularly, and other issues I had, like acne, resolved themselves. Over time, I stopped checking on her and stopped suspecting she would do anything wrong again. She didn't go out much on her own anymore, and if she did, it was was usually with mutual friends. Everything seemed great, or so I thought, until about 6 months ago. After a work reorganization, I met a new coworker. We got along immediately, sharing mutual interests and enjoying each other's company. We started texting, staying late at work to chat, and more. At that point, I had no real intention of taking things to an inappropriate level, but somehow, the connection I shared with this coworker brought back old resentment, distrust, and anger. I tried hard to forgive and forget, but deep down, I never truly moved on. If I could control myself, if I could prevent things from escalating, why couldn't she? The fact she seemed to face no real consequences for her actions, that everyone forgave her so easily, only fueled my resentment. I started checking on her again. I looked at her call and message logs, and lo and behold, I found exactly what I suspected I would. A string of calls to a guy I had considered one of my closest friends up until that point, all from the past week while I was at work. At first, I was furious, almost ready to kick her out of the house right then and there, but then I just went cold. I realized I didn't care anymore, finding that all at once extinguished any remaining love or attachment I might still have had for her. The next day, I met with the coworker I'd been talking to and began my own affair. It was cathartic. It helped lift the weight off my mind and emotional health that I hadn't even realized was there. I felt better and freer than I had in years. Not long after, I contacted a divorce lawyer. At this point, I just wanted out. I started staying out more, didn't bother making up excuses, and avoided my wife as much as I could. There was no way she didn't notice, and I can genuinely say I didn't care. It took her a full week to gather the courage to finally approach me and ask what was going on. That's when I confessed. I told her I knew about the calls. I told her I knew she had been in contact with him behind my back. I told her I was certain she was either having an affair or gearing up for one. Then I told her about my own affair, sharing every graphic detail. As awful as it sounds, seeing her experience the same pain and devastation she had once inflicted on me was liberating. She broke down, crying and wailing. She got sick in the living room. First, she screamed, then she apologized. She claimed it wasn't what it looked like, that she wasn't having an affair with him, that they were planning a surprise party for my upcoming birthday. Then she did something I didn't expect, especially after I told her I wanted a divorce and admitted to my own affair. She begged me to stay with her, to try to make things work, saying she loved me more than anyone else ever could. At that point, I just walked out and went to a motel. I cut off all contact with her completely and refused to acknowledge her existence. That was 2 weeks ago. Since her mother lives nearly 500 kilometers away, she's now staying, of all places, with my parents. Other people, mutual friends, family members, even my own parents, have been bombarding me with messages. Some have begged me to reach out to her, while others have insulted and threatened me. They've said she's barely eating, but she's trying to make this work no matter what, and demanded that I beg for forgiveness for my own wrongdoing. The only people I've spoken to in person are my parents, for whom I've lost all respect. I found out my mother had at least 3 affairs, all of which my father forgave her for. That might explain why my mother sided with my wife so strongly all along. However, they're angry at me for doing this to her, for not acting like a man should, for running away from my responsibilities and hurting my wife in this way. My mother told me she would take care of her for me until I came to my senses, as if wanting her back was somehow a given, and as if she were a small, helpless animal that needed care. They, along with others, supported her claims about why she had contacted people in secret, including the former friend. Given their reaction to both her betrayal and my affair, I find it hard to trust anything they say. Contrast is like night and day. On the bright side, I've discovered she was wrong about no one else wanting me. Since then, I've seen the other woman several times and have gone on 2 casual dates. Apparently, I'm not as undesirable as she claimed. She and others insist she wasn't having an affair. Everyone, including my own parents, who once told me I needed to forgive her and try again, is now labeling me as the bad guy and expecting me to get back together with her and reconcile. My parents have even taken her in, apparently to keep her safe until I come to my senses. But I genuinely don't want to, and I don't feel bad about it. If anything, it feels like we're finally even.
Just be careful. Don't end up like me. Don't get drunk and use protection. My wife had emotional affairs with guys online over a decade ago. I got drunk one night at the bar and had an intimate encounter with a girl from another country. She was a good friend and she made me feel good about myself, so I decided to keep the relationship going. She got pregnant. I chose to live a double life until my kids with my wife were older. Girl ended up having 2 kids with me. I told my wife, let's just say my family situation is far from normal. If you no longer love your wife, leave her while you're still young. Do it before the kids are involved. That's when things get really complicated.
I think you handled it well. It might have been better to divorce the wife on the first try, but you both ended up better by having the revenge affair. You were able to regain your self-esteem and reverse the emasculation that her first affair caused. She is better now because she finally learned empathy after having her emotional guts ripped out by someone she trusted. Anyone who wants to reconcile with an unfaithful wife should level the playing field, in my opinion. Isn't it funny how the cheaters do everything with the boyfriend they refuse to do with their husband at home? Congratulations to the OP.